Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael and I've been making a dingy culvert and dirty stream for underneath the viaduct and precinct on my N-gauge model railway layout. Let's get straight on with it. In DINGY, making a dirty stream. I wanted there to be a stream that ran under the middle arch from a culvert underneath the 1960s shopping precinct. The first job then was to remove some of Ironbridge Works' yard, one of the earliest parts of the layout. The stream will run along a built-up channel, and I want that channel to be straight. I don't want to bring the stream this way as it will hit the wall here and cause me trouble. So slicing the yard along here should do it. I painted the precinct supporting rib black. It looks okay here on the video, but to the naked eye it just looked like black painted card. So I ended up hacking a hole in it with a scalpel and then painting the inside of the hole instead. This looks much better. The arch is narrow and deep, so I would not be able to add scenery directly inside it. I'd have to make this as a separate component away from the layout. I shoved a bit of scrap paper into the gap and used a paintbrush handle to fold the edges. Using the folds as guides, I cut the edges off, but now I had a few gaps. So I used PVA to glue a couple of strips of paper on top, flush against the edges. Whilst that was drying, I tried a couple of ideas for the culvert. I was inspired by pictures of Bradford Beck and the bare concrete culverts that direct it underneath parts of Bradford. I printed a couple of shapes to sticky label and stuck those to cereal packet. This looks okay, but I imagined a narrower stream and a wider opening. This one works. So here's my paper template, and it fits in here like this. I'm going to bring the stream to about here, where it will disappear into another culvert. Let's attack the cereal box supply. This'll do. I stuck the paper template on with glue stick, and then cut the whole thing out as a strip. That works. And with a little bit of PVA on the bottom of this, I tried to drop the Rice Krispie culvert opening onto the Weetabix stream. And I held it in place with an engineer's square. Whilst that was drying, I went and had me tea. Here's the start of the piece then. I need a couple of shallow banks next. I roughly cut a couple of bits of scrap card and then stuck them along the edges of the stream's base. I used 1mm card to create the inner walls of the culvert and then held it all down with weights. Whilst that was drying, I replied to some YouTube comments. Hello Northern Jersey Railroad. So here is the base of my culvert and stream. It fits just right. The slight gaps can be filled in later, although as you will see, a happy side effect of my technique sorted that out magically. I printed grimy concrete textures downloaded from textures.com and stuck them to the culvert with PVA. Using the edge of my mat for support, I chopped through the opening and wrapped the concrete around the edges. This looks convincing enough. For the banks of the stream, I added thin PVA in larger quantities than I would normally use, and then I tore up little strips of toilet paper and roughly scrunched it into the glue. I gave it a quick spray with water from an old hair conditioner bottle, and then added some thin PVA glue over the top. On top of all this, I used very dilute watercolour paint and absolutely soaked the toilet paper whilst moulding it into a bankside-like shape with the paintbrush. With one last coat of glue and water, I had a convincing enough stream bank. I held it down with weights to stop the thin card warping. Whilst that was drying, I went back to looking at inspiring photos. Stones next. I added a few tiny stones using PVA glue and pushed them into the still wet banks. Next, I applied more glue and sprinkled some N-gauge ballast along the bottom of the banks. I sprayed it with water so that the glue was encouraged to seep up into the ballast. Whilst that was drying, I went looking for inspiration again. For the rippling surface of the water, I applied PVA along the stream bed. And then I added the tiniest patches of toilet paper. Using a very wet brush, I pushed and pulled the toilet paper into a representation of ripples. Something like this. Whilst that was drying, I went to the local pub with my wife. The next day, I got some brown paint and thinned it with water, before then applying it to the whole thing. This is the ideal base for everything else. I mixed various shades of browns, greys and whites and gently brushed colour in a splodgy pattern over all of the ballast and stones that I added yesterday. I kept looking at pictures of the real things and realised that especially in deep built up gullies like mine, the stones are generally shades of green rather than brown. So I added green to the mix and carried on brushing colour onto the surfaces. I applied thin PVA to the areas that would be vegetation and then sprinkled scatter into the glue. This causes the scatter to stay on top of the surface of the glue and appear quite thin and patchy once it's dried. So I added more glue and then brushed water on top to make it thick and well stuck. After varnishing with matte varnish the day before, I added a thin layer of green paint onto the concrete too. I finally used bright yellow, blue and red and picked out a few lumpy bits to represent rubbish in the stream. The last job was to use bright white and pick out some of the ripples by gently dry brushing the surface. It's ready for gloss varnish now. I added the varnish directly to the surface of the stream. It'll take a few coats, but you get the idea. Because it's made from thin cereal packet, the multiple layers of wet stuff has made it bend a bit. So I hold it down with weights whilst each layer dries. Whilst that was drying, I took the dog for a walk to look for more inspiration. So here is the almost complete part. I added a bit more rubbish from simple bits of cut paper, a thin green painted shaving of copier paper, some planks made from 2 layers of copier paper, a tarpaulin made from a bit of copier paper, and a laser cut card tire from scale model scenery. I used Uhu glue on the bottom of the component and slid it into place. I poked it down with a ruler and my fingers, and because of all the water I'd used, the card had swollen a little bit, and those gaps that we saw at the start have magically disappeared. I still added a few bushes on top though, where it was needed. Whilst that was drying, I came to my computer and wrote the script for this video. The last time I worked on water was ages ago. Here's a look at an older video about when I made the Chanda. That river was named by a viewer. Maybe this stream can be too. Drop a suggestion in the comments and one of my children will pick the winner from a hat. So until next time, when I start to add the ground around the stream, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.